Welcome to our live Dat Chat podcast here at NOLA.com in a rowdy Saints media room here. We're discussing important things like gum and other issues here in the media room. But Jeff,
so I think we need to get Brett Martell on this podcast.
Luckily for us, we actually saw an OTA practice rather than Gumageddon or Gumgate, and we'll just leave that as an inside joke on this podcast. But Jeff, we got our first chance to see the Saints full stream this offseason, full squad. We didn't get to see any rookie mini camps, so this is our first time, rookies, veterans, and it's what you would expect. Look, they're in helmets, shirts, shorts. We're not going to crack the code today. We're not going to crack the code next week, but you do get a little indication of kind of the things we might see later on and some things they might use this week that they might not use next week.
Yeah, I think it's fun to see some of the players that were out a year ago back on the practice field, looking healthy, running around, doing what they're paid to do and what they love doing. So it's fun. It is fun in that regard to see P.J. Williams back out there on the field, Damon Swan and players that have not had a chance to compete for a while. And you can see how happy they are just to be a part of the action after being sidelined. And it's also our first chance really to size up a lot of the newcomers and to kind of fit them into where they might be getting at least initially looked at on the depth chart. And it's still very early, and the coaches emphasized that to us. And this sounds like it's going to be an evaluation process that goes throughout the offseason, but this was a first step.
Absolutely. And to get involved in the podcast, jump in the NOLA.com comment section. I know we've already got a bunch of questions, and those were asked before we even got to the OTA session, so we might be kind of flip-flopping on what we saw today and some of your questions. And so jump in the NOLA.com comment section, and Jeff will be monitoring our Dat Chat Mixler message board as we usually get a bunch of good questions there. So, Jeff, I guess let's just recap what happened as far as who's out there and who's not. The big guys who are not practicing, Nick Fairley was not even out on the practice field. Mark Ingram was out there not practicing. Willie Snead was out there not practicing. And to some lesser degrees, like Teron Armstead went through walkthroughs but didn't practice in team drills. Kikaha, he was out there but didn't practice. So at least to see some faces out there. And you mentioned P.J. Williams, he was full go. Delvin Breaux was full go.
I think Monte Te'o was kind of limited.
I don't think he did much of anything outside of stretching. Right?
Eric Harris was limited, a few other guys. And they're just being cautious. I think if they had to play a game, they would play, but they're going to be cautious because they don't want any setbacks. And that's what Monte Te'o said, is the key now is not going backward, continue to go forward. And look, these veteran players, guys like Te'o who've played in the league for a while, they don't really need to be out there. I mean, I know it's a new system, but he's playing with Mike Nolan. Sounds like, talking to Dennis Allen, Mike Nolan's actually brought some new ideas and maybe even new scheme changes to this defense, and that's something we might want to investigate a little further. But it sounded like Nolan's going to have a pretty big impact on this defense. And look, why wouldn't he? I mean, the guy's got all kinds of experience and got new ideas, and I think there's something to be said for that. I don't want to say everybody got too comfortable on the defensive side of the ball, but there is, I think, an advantage to bringing in new ideas and a fresh set of eyes and ears in there and experiences because it had been kind of status quo on that side of the ball for a while.
Yeah, as far as coaching, and look, we get it every week now, even after the fact that the likes of Joe Vitt and Bill Johnson aren't coaching anymore, and they think, fans feel like that's going to bring a fresh outlook. And look, it certainly could. Mm-hmm. And Sheldon Rankins in the locker room after practice, look, he said straight up that the defense is tired of being a laughingstock. They don't want to be a laughingstock anymore. And me and you were talking with Kenny Vicar, and he said, look, defense never gets any pub, and the only time they got pub is negative pub. And he brought up, we're good in 2013, but you've been bad for those 5 years. And so I do think that the defense, yes, they're fed up with it, and yet they needed fresh ideas. So I think that will come with this process, OTAs, mini camps, and training camp.
I think one of the things that you and I were talking with him about is how you can turn things around quickly in this league, and lots of times it just comes down to intangibles like confidence and believing in yourselves and getting some momentum and having a little luck. And that's what happened in Atlanta last year. I don't think they were total world beaters. That offense was incredible. But the defense turned it around a lot of ways just because I think they got a little confidence in themselves. I don't think they're extraordinarily talented. I mean, they got rid of half their coaching staff and still spent a lot of draft picks and offseason acquisitions on defense. You can see that can happen. It happened on this defense in 2013, and it could happen again. But a lot of things have to come together, and this is where it all starts in this offseason period right now when they're getting out on the field and starting to find their roles and getting comfortable in the scheme.
Yeah, let's get the questions going, and we'll, like I said, we'll probably bounce back and forth between your questions and maybe some observations. So if we go off on tangents, we go off on tangents. That's the nature of the Dat Chat podcast. Let's go to S97 Fever. Corrections to fix as weaknesses. Linebackers brought on faster coverage linebackers, brought in new linebackers coach. Special teams fired the original special teams coach and brought on new coaches to help alleviate blocked field goals. Brought in Ted Ginn to help with the return game. Offense solidified run game, adding a Hall of Fame back in Adrian Peterson, and drafted players to fill Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles type player drafted to take Streep's place. I think the only two weaknesses left are, one, will someone step up and be a playmaker at tight end, and two, who will be the one to help Cam Jordan with the pass rush. Let's kind of bounce through some of these topics, even though they're saying they were corrected. Let's go through linebackers. I'll just tell you what they did today. And that's, again, just today. You got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it could change tomorrow.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we only get to see one OTA a week for the next 3 weeks. Then we get to three days of mini camp. And things could totally change once you go into training camp. So this is what we saw today. They played a lot of nickel. And it was a lot of two linebackers. And the two linebackers that were with the first team probably shouldn't surprise you. A.J. Klein and Donnell Ellerbe. Klein being the middle, Ellerbe being the weak side. Jeff, to me, if they played week one, that's probably what they hope to see out there. So that's why they're going with him right now.
Yeah, I think Klein is a guy that I think they think a lot of. And they want a guy that can be that quarterback and captain of the defense and get them lined up. And this is a guy that was playing behind as a couple players said today, a guy that was a future Hall of Famer,
right?
And Luke Kuechly. So maybe he's the guy. We'll see, but he's certainly going to get that opportunity. I think Monte Te'o will be in that mix as well once he gets back in the fall and is full go. But right now, Klein's going to be your signal caller on the defensive side until further notice.
Yeah, I'm kind of maybe a little surprised. I said it's not a surprise, but maybe I'm a little surprised that they've got Klein up to speed so quickly. I thought maybe, hey, Craig Robertson might be there the first week or two.
Right, how they normally do it.
Yeah, but no, I think they're going full speed ahead, and they certainly trust Klein already from what we're seeing. So, and then with the second group, I know this is going to ping fans because it was Craig Robertson and Stephon Anthony with the twos a good bit today. And I'm sure people are wondering, Stephon Anthony. Well, this is the time when he's got to prove he can know what's going on and prove to at least make some plays, even if it's in helmets, shirts, and shorts. He's basically got to change his perception that's with the team right now, and that's that he's not ready and able to play.
And he's got Mike Nolan's got a new linebackers coach there. It's a whole new room. It's one position that they really concentrated on in this offseason. And in a way, it's a fresh start, I think, for Stephon Anthony. He's got a different coach to work under, fresh slate. And he's certainly got the athletic ability. There's no question about that. And there's something to be said also for just having a new coach and somebody to look at you and maybe give you a little more confidence and believe in you a little more. So we'll see. I don't think Mike Nolan's judging by anything more than what he sees on the field and in the meeting room with him. Now, if that's good enough, we'll find out.
Now let's go to the special teams part. I could tell you as far as Ted Ginn in the return game, the three returners, they weren't necessarily working on the return game, but they were doing some special teams drills. And the first returner in line was Ted Ginn. The second one was Marcus Murphy. The third one was Alvin Kamara. And I think you can almost do the math. One of those guys is going to be out, and you could predict who the guy is going to be out.
Right.
But, yeah, you're already starting to see that. And then also, Jeff, I don't know if you if you caught this, but in Will Lutz's kicks, they practice, field goal kicking a day, and there was an additional, almost, I don't want to call it a prop, but there were two staffers holding up like these big blue large sticks right above, right in front of the long snapper, and it's to work on Will Lutz's trajectory, because obviously that was a huge problem last year.
Those sticks would have blocked about 4 or 5 field goals.
One of them, one of them at least.
Actually, that he got off because
Yes.
he had some trouble early on. Well, it's obviously a new tactic. Brad Banta, the new special teams coach, maybe it's his idea. It'd be interesting to find out who's bringing in some of these new things. But this is part of having new coaches, new assistants. I saw on the defensive line they had Swiss balls out there running around. That was something different. Again, new ideas from different coaches that I think can only help, especially areas that needed help, like special teams.
Yeah. Now let's go to the offense, and they mentioned Adrian Peterson. Look, he was taking, I want to say the bulk, but it's almost, he probably took every first-team snap as far as in a running situation. Look, Kamara got sprinkled in there a little bit, but it was Adrian Peterson because Mark Ingram missed practice. He was out there, but just sat out practice. Probably something minor injury-related. We're just speculating. It wasn't like he's upset about Adrian Peterson or anything like that, because you see, Odell Beckham's skipping OTAs, guys skipping OTAs. No, it wasn't the case. He was out there. But like Adrian Peterson, and I wrote it in my observations, it seemed like they were trying to work with him in the passing game because you're not going to be getting major runs. So they were trying to work with him in the passing game, and it's funny, that's the headline of my observations, and a Vikings reporter, Matt Venzel from the Straw Tribune up in Minneapolis, and some other Vikings fans are saying, oh, well, this is the same storyline we've heard for about the last 10 years. So I wonder if the Saints are going to try to crack the code there. But look, if he's going to be in a Mark Ingram role at times, he's got to be able to show some ability to catch the football.
Well, yeah, I think Sean Payton's really big on trying to break tendencies and deny that, and doesn't want defenses to get a beat on personnel packages. And if all you do is run the ball with Adrian Peterson, they're going to figure that out really quickly in this league. So he's going to have some times where he definitely catches balls, but I don't think that's not going to be his primary use and role in this offense. But he's going to have to work in there. There's no doubt. I think Kamara is going to be that guy, and you can see that they're already thrusting him out there pretty quickly too in that nickel package, trying to get what is a very difficult. I mean, running back in this offense is not easy. You hear running backs talk about it. I mean, there's a lot they have to learn. That's why you see so many young guys struggle early on, because it's you have to do everything. You have to learn pass protection. You have to learn pass routes, and not just running the ball. There's a lot put on their shoulders, and so in a way, it's kind of good that Mark Ingram's not out there, because the guys that need to learn are Kamara and Peterson, even though Peterson's been in the league a while.
Yeah, Ingram knows what's going on. I don't think that's a given, and that's probably why, even if it's minute, they're saying, all right, Mark, sit down, no big deal. Okay, that's fine. And so, yeah, I think you have Peterson and Kamara. This is the total learning process. This is the point where they need to figure out terminology. They need to figure out what they're doing. Just learning how some offensive linemen block, learning how the ins and outs of routes, whatever. And this is the time. So yeah, I don't see any major issue there.
I'll tell you, it did strike me though, just seeing Peterson for the first time up close, and this is one of the things we get out of being out here in OTAs. I mean, he's a tall guy for a running back. I realize that shouldn't come as a shock. He's been a Pro Bowler, but he stands out literally in that group. I mean, he's 6'1", and he's every bit of it. And you forget, I mean, a guy like Mark Ingram's, 5'11", 5'10". I mean, he's more of a bowling ball kind of build. This is a tall, rangy guy. Almost looks like a mini hybrid tight end or something out there. He just has a different build about him. He also has a presence about him. You could see a lot of the young backs talking to him, coming up to him. And there's going to be an advantage to having him here in this locker room beyond what he does on the field.
Yeah, now let's go to the weakness part of this question. I know we're staying on S97 Fever's question, but we've seen all these things, so we might as well just bullet point them. And if we talk about them again later, we talk about them again later. One, will someone step up and be a playmaker at tight end? Well, let's just go through the tight end position right now. Fleener's out there. He actually made a couple nice catches today. I noted that in my OTA observations. The Who-Man, Michael Ho'omanawanui, is out there practicing. Josh Hill was not out there, and so I think that's notable. And you saw, I think it's Clay Harbor. He was out there. You saw, some snaps, maybe a couple snaps with the ones, but mainly he's a veteran guy. So I think they got to figure out what they've got at tight end. But yeah, right now it's still Fleener. I mean, he's still going to be the primary guy until further notice. Now, further notice might be the end of this year, and it might be the end. But as of right now, I mean, that's not going to change.
Clay Harbor, we were laughing on the sidelines. It sounds like a gated community in Gretna or something, Sunny Clay Harbor. Come on, just 10 minutes from downtown.
Why?
I don't know.
You're throwing shade at the West Bank.
This was a conversation we had at practice today, and this is what happens on the sidelines, right?
Yes.
When you get bored after a while, you start.
Dude, this is one practice in, and we're bored already. That's not good.
But look, they're not really. At one time, I was thinking this was going to be a position group that's going to be somebody who's going to get cut. That's a pretty decent player, but it's pretty cut and dried there. I think we know who's going to make the team. At tight end, and Kobe Fleener could easily have a big bounce back year. This is a guy that kind of got off to a bad start, and then he actually had some decent games, some really productive games. But I think most people would say he had a disappointing year because expectations were so high. But he could have a big year easily, especially with people paying attention to Mike Thomas now and all these running backs.
He could easily not have one, too.
I know. I'm just talking about glass half full here.
Jeff Duncan, always known as glass half full.
Mr. Positive.
Yeah, and let's go with who will be the one to help Cam Jordan with the pass rush. We saw today Alex Okafor was the number one guy at the edge. We figured that. I asked Dennis Allen about him afterwards, and he said, look, it's too early to evaluate. And I said, I get that, but you obviously know what you're getting with him, so he's going to get the first shot. And he said, look, he's had some injury issues, and yet this is a one-year deal, prove-it deal, beneficial for both sides. And we haven't talked to Okafor outside of a conference call, but even just out of that, you could tell he knows he has an opportunity to be a full-time starter and really build on this one-year deal and maybe become more bona fide in a defense.
The Nick Fairley of the edge rushers, right?
Exactly.
Basically the same situation. The difference being, of course, is that Fairley came in to the league as a top 10 draft pick, big-time talent that everybody knew could be a playmaker if he put it all together. Okafor, I think, was more seen as a situational guy, lasted the middle rounds. So I think if they are able to get production from him and get that kind of Fairley type of season, it's going to be a boon for this defense because that's one area that they've got to get better at. And that's one thing he's known for, is getting after the quarterback. So we'll see. That it's got to happen, or they're not going to make the kind of improvements they want to make this year.
Right, and just kind of piggybacking off of that, it was nickel defense basically today, and so we did see 4 defensive linemen. We saw 2 linebackers, which means there were 5 defensive backs. Who are the defensive backs? It was Bro, P.J. Williams at corner, and you had 3 safeties. And we've seen that obviously a bunch in the past. And as of right now, today, what they worked on, that's what they did. And it was Kenny Vaccaro, Von Bell, and Marcus Williams. None of this should be a major surprise. I think they want to get Williams in as much as they humanly can. And I forget if it was you that asked Dennis Allen or someone did. Do you think of yourself as a 4-3 or a 3-4? He says he still sees himself as a best 11. And you can't blame him there,
right.
Especially when you've got 3 safeties who you feel like you can play.
Yeah, I think this thing's going to evolve throughout the offseason, and that's what they're trying to do right now is figure out who their best players are and where they fit in. And that will dictate, the way Dennis Allen explained it to us today, their personnel is going to dictate what they play.
Right.
And they're going to figure out who their best 11 guys are, and that was an old Greg Williams line. Every defensive coach uses those lines. And I don't think it's really much different than the way we've heard Sean Payton talk about the offense. I mean, they see who they've got in the perimeter core, and that's kind of what they emphasize in their personnel packages. And I think that's what's going to happen here throughout this offseason as they figure out who their best 11 guys are. But right now, early on, I think they like their safeties.
And we mentioned Marcus Williams, second-round draft pick. Where's the first-round draft pick, Marshawn Lattimore? I know people are going to be wondering where he was. He didn't play any snaps with the ones. If I'm not mistaken, I think he basically was relegated to the third team.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
It's nothing to panic about. You would have probably hoped, oh, wow, maybe he can play with the first unit. But he's still trying to get his feet under him, literally and figuratively. But it shouldn't be a major thing. I think it was Ken Crawley was with the twos, maybe Sterling Moore, some guys who are experienced.
Guys you expect, yeah.
Right, and so Lattimore's with the threes, and even Mike Thomas, they were talking about how the one-on-one battles were between those two guys because they've been jawing Ohio State teammates. He said, look, it's a week, so let's give him a little more time before he can catch up because, look, it's going to be a big transition for him. But it's also a plus. PJ and Bro, healthy, going 100%. Both of them talked to the media today, and both are obviously determined to be ready to go and be starters. And if you can have Lattimore elevate, you got three good corners.
Yeah, I think that's the plan, eventually to have Williams be the nickel guy, and you'd have Lattimore outside because it's just less to have to learn in the NFL levels for a rookie. I think that's going to be tough to try and get him to learn two positions. So I think ideally Lattimore becomes your starter outside with Bro, and then PJ's the guy that plays inside a little more and is a little more flexible and versatile in that role. We'll see. I mean, it's so early. There's no way to start sizing this up, but that makes sense to me if you wanted to get him on the field. And why wouldn't you? He's the number 11 pick in the draft.
Right.
But I think it's a good sign that Williams is already working into the mix. Like, clearly they think a lot of him. And Dennis Allen talked a lot about him today. This is a guy that seems to pick things up pretty quickly, and that's another factor that you have to consider this. I think Dennis said that this is the third installation for these rookies, third time through the defense, and they'll get a couple more times as that offseason goes along before camp. So by the time they come back here in late July, they'll have been through this defense 4 or 5 times, and they probably still will have their heads swimming because it's just so complex.
Yeah, and especially when you're going up against practice, and if you're Marcus Williams and you're almost trying to match wits with Drew Brees, well, I don't care how smart Marcus Williams comes in, Drew Brees knows the ins and outs of everything. So this will be the ultimate test for him and the ultimate, battleground for him to be battle-tested when you come into week one. And if any indications today, again, one day, but still, we get the sense that they would love to see Marcus Williams play as early and often as possible. And so getting as many first-team reps is going to be huge for him.
And one guy we didn't talk about who actually had a nice play today was Rafael Bush, who's an old but new again veteran in the secondary, knows this system really well, went with Dennis Allen to Denver, played for him there, and then also played for him obviously here. So he's quite familiar with this system, and he had a nice pick in team drills of Chase Daniel. But it's nice to see that. You don't see that very often, especially early on when these guys are running around. So it was good to see him back and making a play.
He actually recovered a fumble today, too. Adrian Peterson had the fumbled snap, and that was between an exchange between Peterson and Daniel, and Bush got back there and ended up picking that up. So he had a couple good plays.
Were they reenacting the Brett Favre NFC Championship game goal line?
Unfortunately, that's the first thing that came back to me. Oh, Peterson's back and fumbling in New Orleans. We've seen that 1, 2, 5 times in that
bailed
in that
Reggie
game.
Bush out.
I know. But let's go to JP. Hey, guys, looking at the roster, I think it's clear Sean Payton wants to replicate the 2009 squad as best he can. Will it be enough? That remains to be seen. But my question here is, how would you rank the NFC South at this very moment? And JP saying his unbiased ranking would be Falcons, Bucks, Saints, Panthers. It's one of the topics that you were talking with Vaccaro about too, how things can shift. You might think the NFC South is one thing entering the season, and it could totally turn, and you don't know. It's one of the more unpredictable divisions most years, and it could be that, but I don't know. I think the Falcons are number one, but I think it's kind of a crapshoot, honestly. Tampa could be good. I think the Saints could elevate their game if they're able to play well in that early stretch. Carolina, you could put them last, and yet you could see them rebounding. So I think Falcons may be the class, but they could be caught by any of these teams, honestly.
Yeah, I was trying to think of this actually over the weekend. There's been a lot of comparisons to 2009, the vibe, the fact that they're coming off 500 level seasons and kind of laying in the weeds under the radar, whatever phrase you want to use. But the biggest difference to me, and I can't recall off the top of my head because my memory is fading in my old age. Is
Dude, you're so old.
I know. The difference is in the NFC South. I just think it's much better than it was in 2009. You've got not only first-round draft picks at quarterback, but number one overall picks, guys like Jameis Winston and Cam Newton, and then you got Matt Ryan, who's an MVP guy,
who was a number 3 overall pick. I mean,
he's the only one that was there in 2009. I don't know who the quarterback. That's what I was trying to think of. Who were the quarterbacks in Carolina? Wasn't it like?
It wasn't Delhomme anymore, was it? No,
I think it was the Clausen maybe, or Jimmy Clausen or something like that.
It could have been Jimmy Clausen.
And then Tampa had a number of guys going in and out. So I just feel like
Josh Freeman.
Freeman might have been the quarterback, yeah.
I gotta look it up.
Bruce Gradkowski.
I was about to say him.
They're not as established, I think, in their evolution as they are now. So I think it's more difficult to do I think the mission's going to be much more challenging in the NFC South than it was back then, because I think the Saints just were clearly the best team back then. I think they're in the mix, but I think everybody's kind of in the mix, and their quarterbacks are a lot better.
And people ask, what are the expectations you have for the Saints? And my expectations aren't going to change. People have asked me, should it be playoffs? Should you expect playoffs? Me personally, I would not expect playoffs. That's not in my expectation. My expectation is they're still an average team, and they got to prove it to me otherwise. But I do think that you could look at Tampa, you could look at Carolina, probably the same thing. Now, Atlanta, you expect playoffs, but we've seen Super Bowl champions, not just champions, but really the runner-ups, the losers of those games, plummet. Look at Carolina. Mm-hmm. And they've historically plummeted the following year. And so I think the Saints, if there's going to be a time they could jump back up in this thing, I think this could be this year.
I think they're the second best team in the division. I think they're above Tampa, even though I saw Peter King's rankings the other day were similar to the reader here. I think he had Tampa like 11th in the league. That seems too high to me. I just haven't seen it yet from Jameis Winston.
I agree.
To me, everybody's talking about what a great leader he is and all these things, but I don't see it on the field. Now, I know he's young, so you have to let guys develop. Matt Ryan took him a while to come around, but they do have a lot of talent everywhere else. But they're only going to go as far in this passing-dominated league as he takes them. And right now, the best quarterback in the division is, you have to say, Matt Ryan, and Drew Brees is the second best.
Heresy. What? You can't say
that. Those are the teams I picked with the two best quarterbacks. And I go back
there you go, glass half full. No, that's glass totally
I go back to this.
Saints fans.
The Falcons should have won the Super Bowl.
No question.
They lost the Super Bowl.
They blew
that was a team that was 25 points up on one of the best teams in the league, if not the best team in the league. And I thought they were the better team and lost the game. So they have to be considered.
They totally blew it.
Right.
And well, let's be honest. Jameis Winston, has he shredded a bad Saints defense the last 2 years? No. He looked very ordinary.
No, he looked overwhelmed.
I guess, what was it? The game
in Tampa? Or
what was it? His rookie year, they came in and beat the Saints, but it wasn't because he was dominant.
Defense made a bunch of plays. Right. Yeah. Look, and they brought in Deshaun Jackson. They drafted O.J. Howard. They given him some weapons at running back. I think the pressure's on for him to produce. And frankly, sometimes when you watch Tampa play, they're not the most inventive, creative scheme in the world either. And I don't know if that's because out of design or they feel like they have to have the training wheels still on Winston. But when I watch them, I know Dirk Cutters has a good reputation, but they just seem pretty limited offensively. And they've changed over a lot of guys. I mean, no more Vincent Jackson's gone, so they've had some changeover in their personnel. I'm eager to see that team this year because they always flash on defense with some playmakers, and that's an athletic defense that has a lot of high draft picks on it.
Yeah, I feel like it's the last couple of years. Tampa, you feel like, they're on the cusp. They're on the cusp. Right now, they're still just on the cusp, and they've never proven that they could get over that. Saints at least have, the Panthers at least have, so
Falcons.
obviously the Falcons. So we need to before me totally buying in Tampa, I got to see it to believe it.
Well, TJ asks on the Mixler feed about Trey Hendrickson, the rookie edge rusher. I didn't, be honest with you, didn't get to watch much of him, so I would like to get your thoughts if you saw much of him. I was concentrating more on Okafor and Kakaha.
The fact that neither one of us really have any impression on him at all just kind of goes to show you. But it's one practice. I mean,
there's a million guys running around.
We're not going to be able. We're not going to be able to get to everyone in one practice, and that's okay. But because what if he did stand out and we just didn't say it? So, I mean, that's certainly a fair question. It's someone we're going to be zeroing in on, especially because Kikaha's not working in right now, and behind Okafor, I mean, I guess you have Tapp, and then you have Hendrickson, and then you have Al-Qadim Muhammad, and so we're going to be seeing more of those guys in the coming weeks. But yeah, we need to. We just he didn't make some impression, good or bad, honestly.
Yeah, I would say the expectations for him should be you're not going to see much of him this year, and if you see a lot of him, that's good. I would keep my expectations low because I think Okafor, Kakaha, those are going to be your Darryl Tapp. They're going to be your edge rush guys. But if Hendrickson gets off to a great start, then that's a great sign because I don't think the expectations for a mid-round draft pick out of Florida Atlantic, I would be surprised.
Yeah, and on the other side, if you see him early, you just hope if you're a Saints fan, it's not because Okafor's hurt and other guys are hurt.
Right.
And those are the guys you have to roll with, but they do at least have a bunch of bodies over there. I feel like they've got more depth there rather than you're having to rely on Kikaha, who's not a prototypical defensive end, Kasim Adebali, Obum Gwacham. Those are the guys who are the top three in the depth chart. And when Kikaha got hurt, the top two in the depth chart last year were Adebali and Gwacham, and they had to go out and sign Kruger. They're not in that spot this year.
Is Kruger playing anywhere?
He's not signed anywhere.
Yeah.
The fact that they brought back Darryl Tapp and left Kruger out, I think, is telling.
Speaks volumes. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Michael Hefker asks on the Mixer feed about this exact position. So let's follow up on that. He asks about who do you think is going to be the guy opposite Cam Jordan? I mean, that's probably the number one question on the defense in this offseason. Where are the sacks and hurries coming from? I don't know. I don't know where we're going to – I mean, I think Okafor is going to get the first shot, right?
I think he's going to get the first shot, second shot, and third shot just because he's been there, done it. These other guys are going to have to impress, and it's also something to where you look at Kikaha – he can't be your first down defensive end. You can't. You're going to have to try to figure out a role for him, and you're not taking Cam Jordan out. And I wouldn't think you'd put Okafor and move him on the inside. So they're going to have to figure out what they want to do with Kikaha. And honestly, Kikaha to me has to prove he can still get it done. If he can't get it done, you got to move on.
They could cut him. If he doesn't come back, I mean, it's unfortunate.
I don't think they'd want to cut him, but he's got to prove they can figure out a role for him and do something.
They could, but that would probably only occur if you felt really good about Hendrickson and Muhammad and some of your other guys there. But if you don't come back, I mean, that's a tough call. But we'll see. I mean, we're really early in the process there, and I think if Donnell Ellerbe is healthy, he's a factor in the pass rush. We saw him used there last year. We know Dennis Allen likes to blitz. He's not afraid to blitz. He'll use Kenny Vaccaro. I think Rafael Bush can blitz. So there's some other ways to put pressure, but that's not ideal. You'd love to be able to get it from your front four and not have to send those guys. The really good teams in the league, that's what you want to be able to do, and they're able to do it. Seattle doesn't have to blitz very much because they get pressure up front. We'll see. I don't know. That's the biggest question, I think, on this defense, and I'm still skeptical.
You bring up Seattle. They've got two good edge guys in Averill and Michael Bennett, and so that certainly helps you. The Saints haven't
Frank Clark.
Right. The Saints haven't had two good edge guys since Cam Jordan and Junior Gillette, and that was I guess you can call it 2 years together. They were okay, and then Saints moved on, and they've been scrambling there ever since.
Maybe you get more pressure with Fairley and Rankins.
That's what I'm wondering.
In the middle, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm wondering.
That's ideally, I think, what this defense should probably try and hang their hat on, because anything you get on the other side, I think, is going to be kind of lanyap.
Yeah, let's go to Amity Saint, loyal Dat Chat question asker. Is that proper English?
I think so, yeah. We should ask Brett Martell.
Sounded like I had gum in my mouth. Number one, I'll continue to beat the drum with the 2,000 rushing yards. Is a goal like Brett Martell's staring at us in the media room. Man, he's getting a lot of shout-outs today, not just because of his model looks. The 2,000-yard rushing yards goal is what they'd like to see. The 2 times we've done it, 2 best teams, both 13-3. And look, I do think that they've molded their running back core to mirror those 2 teams, 9 and 11. You got Ingram, Peterson, and Kamara, and it looks real similar to what they had in those years. So who knows if they can get there, but they're going to try to at least mimic those 2 years with those guys.
Yeah, with the same roles, right? Two kind of co-lead backs, and then your nickel back satellite guy. Yeah, it gives them depth there. And, I read Peter King's evaluation in the Monday Morning Quarterback, and I would like to get Peyton's input on this. I don't think he could ever tip his hand in that way, but Peter may have just been stretching a little bit, saying he thinks they're going to alter the offense and run the ball more. I don't know. I've never believed that with Sean.
I'm going to doubt that.
I just don't think they are, just because they went out and got Adrian Peterson. I think they're going to continue to do what they do. And, yeah, maybe they run it one more time a game in the end, but I just don't see it really affecting. Now, what could happen, and this is true of any offense, and we hear that stat all the time about the Saints when they run the ball more than so many times,
30 times, right?
But it's misleading because they're running more because they are ahead. So if they're running to close out the game, that's why that stat's really kind of misleading, I think.
Yeah, it's not some concerted effort to do it. You don't run 30 times and rush for 90 yards and just bang your head against the wall. No, that's not what you do.
Right. If they ran 30 times last year against Seattle, they would have got beat. Instead, they went out and strafed them and let Drew Brees win the game.
And, oh, by the way, Drew Brees is still the main weapon. Let's not kid ourselves here.
Right. And it's going to be that way. Now one player I want to talk about, I talked about in my observations, that kind of stood out to me today was Corey Fuller. And that's a guy that I think a lot of fans don't know much about. He kind of was signed under the radar last year while the season was playing out in December. And he was a draft pick of the Detroit Lions. And he's out there in the mix right now. He's a guy that people don't even know about, and could be in the mix for a roster spot, I think, at the receiving position.
Yeah, you look at, they have obviously Michael Thomas, Ted Ginn. He's with the ones running around, doing his role as Devery Henderson. I mean, that's who he's going to be. Willie Snead didn't practice today, and so you saw when they were doing 3 wide receiver sets, saw a lot of Brandon Coleman in there, and also some other guys you kind of saw in there, Jake Lampman. So you're going to see guys like that being A, worked in early, and B, vie for a spot. I mean, Brandon Coleman, he's on a 1-year deal, exclusive rights free agent. I mean, it's not like Brandon Coleman, he's got his size. He is who he is. We know who he is. He's not going to all of a sudden turn on the switch and become Megatron. I mean, that's not going to happen. So there are certainly at least one spot. I'd say a 5th receiver spot is to be had. Yeah, and yet we've also seen, Corey Fuller. I feel like I go back a couple years. Josh Morgan was teetering on the roster. Didn't happen. So, and it's not like there's this big-time need to, let's make sure we have a veteran guy.
Right.
They have that in Ginn, and they survived without it last year, and the receivers were the trio was best in the NFL. So,
but that spot, though, is going to be a competition. And somebody's going to win it. And you're right. It could be one of these young guys that nobody knows about, but there's an opening there. And Fuller's the kind of guy that could win it just because he's got some speed, former track athlete at Virginia Tech. And there's certainly a need for some of that in this receiving core once you get past Ginn. There's no real blazer there. I mean, I don't think Mike Thomas is considered a real blazing guy. Certainly not Snead, and we know Brandon Coleman, even though he's got good speed for a guy his size, that's not his forte.
No, your speed guy is going to be Ted Ginn, and it's almost like we could draw his route tree, and it could be a vertical line 40 times.
But, I was thinking about that today. I mean, if Ted Ginn were to get hurt, that's a pretty pedestrian receiving corps as far as speed.
Oh, sure.
They don't have, a lot of speed out there.
Well, you think about it last year, though. Their speed guy was Cooks. If he got hurt, they'd black it too. So this isn't the first time they've kind of gone this route, and they've kind of lived by the sword, and it hadn't really burned them too many times throughout, say, the Peyton Breeze era.
Yeah, well, then if something like that were to happen, they may run the ball more and become like a little more short passing game. But defenses pick up on that very quickly. You can't just all of a sudden go to a short passing game. I mean, it's way too complicated to just kind of simplify. We hear fans all the time say, "Why don't they just go no huddle? Just run no huddle every play." That does work for a little while, but it wouldn't if you just consistently did that.
Right. Let's go to Trey747. Anthony and Fleener are the mystery guys, but with all the linebackers signed, the Saints may have already given up on him. Just unreal. They can't figure out a way to use his skills. Fleener's another example where the Saints thought they could make him play differently than as a Colt. Seems like he's still playing the same way. Look, those two guys came in big-time expectations. Obviously, Anthony and Fleener, neither one have really lived up to him. But how about we venture off from those two guys? Who are, quote-unquote, mystery guys, do you feel like, that you don't know a lot about, or you feel like you haven't seen the best from them, or really, can they hack it, honestly? I think I could say my primary mystery guy would be on defense. Outside of that, and it would be P.J. Williams. I think he's a mystery. We've seen him play pretty well in training camp. He played pretty decent, even though Oakland was tough. He played pretty decent in the one game, but that's all we've seen him. To me, I think he's almost a quintessential mystery guy. Talent-wise, he could start, but is that really the truth? I'm just saying that because of what I saw in training camp. Is he good enough to start? I don't know. So if I'm going to bring up a mystery guy, I'd say P.J. Williams would be one of my mystery guys. Actually, I got to probably scan a roster like you're doing.
Well, I would
just to jog my brain.
The
for some
guy
of the guys.
I'm strangely intrigued by, and it sounds like a total nerd. Saints way too much about the Saints nerd. Is Adam Bighill. Just these guys that come from Canada, they signed him. There's always these expectations now when they get Delvin Breaux, who comes in as a bona fide starter. I'm intrigued by him and Eric Harris, who a year ago they were really high on. Both these guys from Canada, and I have no idea if they can play or not, but there's always, to me, a little bit of a mystery of guys that played in that league because it's a totally different kind of game. And most of them ended up there for a reason. They couldn't make it in the league, at least initially in the NFL. But we've seen more and more players coming from Canada in the CFL and making impact. So I'm kind of intrigued by both those players to see where they fit into the depth chart and how they're being used.
Yeah, and Cello actually bringing up, I don't know if Cello's piggybacking off of the question below, but Cello saying, I know of a guy who had 19 sacks in a season at the college level. He was looking like a solid pro, but yet another ACL injury derailed what seemed to be a good start for his career. Am I wrong in thinking he's not a mystery, but instead an under-the-radar secret weapon on the verge of blowing up opposing backfields? I don't think it's any mystery with him.
Who's he talking about?
That's Haley Kikaha. If he's not healthy, there's no mystery there. It's health problems with him. And because of that, and he's undersized, I think it's more the mystery, where do you play him? But I think it's no mystery. If he's not healthy, he's not going to play.
I just think a guy with multiple ACL surgeries, it's just hard, man. It's hard to come back from that, especially at that position where you're using your levers for leverage off the edge. I mean, I know that always wasn't his strength. I mean, he wasn't a Junior Gillette guy blowing around tackles, but that's just tough to come back from at this level where the competition is so fierce and you lose just a little bit off your step. We'll see. I'm obviously everybody's going to pull for the guy. He's a really good guy to deal with from our perspective, and has a lot of intangibles that I can see why they liked him and why they drafted him. But it's just hard. Once you lose just a little bit in this league, it makes a big difference.
Let's go to water, and this could be a question where you're like, but one of these things just stand out to me. Who looks noticeably better, faster, bigger, or smaller? Again, it is one OTA practice, but I will say this. In the locker room afterward, Michael Thomas talked to the media for a little while, and someone asked him, kind of after the interviews were done, are you looking bigger? Are you bigger? And he said, yeah, he is a little bigger. You could kind of tell within his chest he's kind of put on some muscle.
Yeah, he's yoked.
Yeah, so I think if you're going to ask me who's looking bigger right now, to me, Michael Thomas is looking a little bigger.
Yeah, and that seems like a natural thing. You come out of college, you get into the NFL weight program, have a full season. He probably knows he needed to concentrate on getting stronger, getting off the line. He would be the guy to me just initially that I think of. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, that's what you want. He's going to be the number one guy. That's going to help him probably withstand injury more, I would think. And he noticeably looked bigger to me. I didn't notice anybody looking smaller. I would say Daniel Lasco looked a little leaner to me, looked a little lighter, which probably is a good thing for a running back. He stood out to me in that way.
Is it bad for me to say maybe Chase Daniel looks like he's more dad bodish than ever? Is it bad?
I think it's accurate.
I think it's accurate.
He looked like a starting nose tackle on maybe a junior college.
Come on, he's not that.
He looked a little short and stocky,
a little round.
He looked like a softball player.
Well, he dominated in the softball home run hitting challenges.
That's true, but he's always been kind of built unlike most quarterbacks.
I know, but maybe it's just because I hadn't seen him in a while. I don't know, but it's maybe he look a little dad bodish.
Did you watch much of the new long snappers? I mean, that was interesting to me.
I will say this: I did not put it in my observations, and someone in the media corps actually needled me about maybe asking Thomas Morstead about the long snapper battle. But
that's a question for like middle of training camp when you're in the dog days. You're already asking about the long snappers.
As Mike Triplett of ESPN, former bum colleague, needled me, as we just made that public. But I mentioned it in my 10 offensive players to watch leading up to OTAs because it's a battle. Look, Justin Drescher's gone. That's Thomas Morstead's good buddy, and actually the guy who I saw taking the primary snaps with the main field goal unit was Chase Dominguez. So,
yes.
And he's the one who was they signed as an undrafted rookie, and
he's a big long snapper.
He's a big guy,
6'5", 240.
He's a big guy, and if you're going to go out and get one, he's much bigger than Justin Drescher.
They'll have trouble leaping over him, won't they?
Right, exactly.
A little more trouble.
Well, if they
breaking
do it,
the rules,
it's illegal.
Breaking the rules.
Yeah.
But look, everybody's going to know who he is if he can't deep snap.
Right.
That's a thankless position that doesn't really get any notice at all until somebody messes up. And Justin Drescher never messed up. I mean, never.
I think I jinxed him. I wrote a column on him during training camp maybe 2 years ago, and it was like the first time he actually screwed up. And he said he never screwed up a snap. Last time he did it was in high school, and he did it the ensuing season. And now just Morstead, look, that's his buddy, and it doesn't seem like that's the plan. I mean, they're going to go with who they brought in.
Yeah, well, we'll see until one of them
totally screws up.
Skids one back to the holder in preseason, and Peyton will be on the phone to Drescher tomorrow probably.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those positions that people don't think about, and it's such a weird, unique specialty position. And the Saints haven't had any issues with it for multiple years now. So
yeah, let's go to Chai Saints fan. Hi, Larry and Jeff. Thanks for doing the podcast. Well, thanks for chiming in. We keep hearing the comparisons between Alvin Kamara to Sproles and Reggie Bush. After watching his highlights, I think the better comparison is Pierre Thomas with a little bit more speed. What do you think? I think for me it may be a little too early to tell, but I just think as far as Kamara and Pierre, Kamara, you would feel way more comfortable putting in a slot spot as a wide receiver. I don't think you'd feel super comfortable doing that with Pierre Thomas. And I think that's probably more the comparison. And yeah, I think we'll be able to judge that a little more as we go along. But also, Sean Payton said it, Mickey Loomis said it, even Alvin Kamara said it himself. He envisions himself as a Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush type player. So maybe that's why it's the easy comparison right now.
He said that. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, he said it during once he was drafted. I think it was posed as a question, and he saw himself envisioned in that role.
Yeah, I think what the reader's saying, and I think is accurate, is that he's not as small as those guys. He's a little bigger. I mean, he's probably built a little more like Reggie, but he does have a little more size. What is he, 5'10", 214, they say. But that's not a bad comparison. A faster or maybe a little quicker.
Pierre Thomas is one of the better backs in Saints history, so that's not a bad comparison.
Right.
And he started as a returner.
He actually measured 5'9" and a half, 214 at the combine. So ran a 4.5, which isn't blazing, but still pretty.
Still fast enough.
Still fast. Faster than you and me, I think. So
faster than me, yes.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt he's faster than me. But he's I think, maybe his own guy, like it's hard to pigeonhole him into any of those. I mean, Darren Sproles is such a unique player. I don't think we've ever seen a guy come through New Orleans like him. So small, yet actually he was a pretty tough runner for a guy his size. And I think that Kamara is just a guy, and I've said this in my observations, and I shouldn't say it because somebody in our league might be listening to our podcast, but draft him in your fantasy league because I think he's going to have a big year.
Draft him if it's point per reception.
Yes.
Yes.
You can put up big numbers in 10-yard increments and stuff because I think, look at those numbers that Darren Sproles put up years ago. I'm not saying he's going to put up record-breaking numbers like Sproles, but he's a guy that I think is going to have a bigger role than maybe we think.
Well, Jeff, you got someone on the Corey Fuller train right away. TJ saying, calling it right now, Fuller will pass up Ginn and Ginn will be cut.
Oh, gosh.
What do you think?
Day one.
Hot take.
Day one of OTAs, we're already cutting people because a guy made one great catch. No, look, Ted Ginn is a guy they're counting on. He's going to be a part of this team and play a key role, I think.
Oh, I think his role is all you got to do is turn on Devery Henderson tape, and that's what he is.
And returning punts.
Well, and he's actually more than Devery because Devery wasn't returning punts or anything. I mean, Ted Ginn, he's thrived off of that, and he already says that's what he wants to do and be a part of it, and that would be no surprise to me. I could easily envision him being the punt returner, Kamara being the kick returner.
Yes.
And they back up each other. I mean, if one gets hurt, double duty, or vice versa. Well, perfect world. You have one doing one doing the other.
I didn't see Traven Doral getting much reps. Did you?
Nothing that I could recall off the bat. And he would be getting reps, and Garrett Grayson would be his quarterback. And oh, poor Garrett Grayson. I'm just
hater.
Well, it's just kind of true. I mean, when last year, just think about it. He's in the practice squad, and they're taking Joe Callahan off waivers. And he's a third quarterback, and you're still the practice squad guy. But it's, a snap flew through Grayson's hands today. I mean, come on, are we really doing that still? Really?
If Brian Alley Walsh were on our staff, he would have made him who's not.
I was about to say, I was waiting to bring back who's hot and who's not.
One bad play, and all of a sudden you're not hot. You're labeled the kiss of death from Brian Alley Walsh, who might not have seen 4 other bad plays, but that's how it works, man, when you're out there. I'm trying to find a good comparison from some of these scouts for Kamara, and I'm yet to find one that really stands out, like somebody who he's compared to. And I think he might be a unique guy. The thing that I think was interesting about him when I did some research on him was he was a big-time recruit out of Georgia who really, when he came out of high school, and he signed with Alabama, but Georgia is really top-notch elite high school football. And he came out the same year as Von Bell would actually be an interesting guy to talk to because he came out the same year as Von Bell, and I think Von Bell's team might have been a different class, but Von Bell was also up for the Georgia Player of the Year.
Okay.
So were Deshaun Watson, all these Nick Chubb, all these big-time players, and Kamara was the statewide Player of the Year over all these top Georgia prospects. So he was really well thought of, and I think he probably feels like one of these guys that was destined to be here because he's he's been kind of projected to be a top guy for a long time.
Yep. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of our live Dat Chat
Man, that was
podcast.
kind of abrupt.
I know, just ending it.
Quit rambling, Duncan.
Well, that's because Mike Triplett's throwing stuff at us to zip it in the media room because he's painting to write. So
hard finish, or what do they say in TV? In a hard
out.
Hard out.
That
was a hard out.
Yeah, up against the top of the hour break. So, but follow all of our coverage of all things Saints at NOLA.com and in our print editions of the Times-Picayune. And if you missed any of this podcast, we of course put it up on NOLA.com later on this afternoon. You can check it out on our NOLA.com SoundCloud page and iTunes page. So for Jeff Duncan, I'm Larry Holder. Thanks for joining us out here at Saints facility, and we'll do this again next Thursday for another live edition of our podcast. So for Jeff, Larry, thanks for joining us.
And don't eat the gum.
Don't eat it.